I've owned this fully electric 2021 Kia Niro for a bit over a year now, and in that time I've driven it 30,000 kilometres, or a bit over, so I've driven it quite a lot, and because of that I've actually had to service it 2 times in the past year, so I thought I'd tell you a bit about what that was like. Unfortunately, I didn't actually film any of the servicing process, so there's not a lot I can show you, but I thought I'd tell you the full story of how everything happened. To start with, I want to mention the service intervals Kia has laid out for the car, because, in my opinion, I think it's a bit over the top. In theory, one of the advantages of owning an electric vehicle is meant to be that you don't need to service it as often, and when you do, there's not really much work that needs to be done on them. And this is very much true for newer EV-only brands like Tesla and Rivian and probably some others like that. But EVs from more traditional brands like Kia can sometimes end up having more traditional servicing schedules that aren't all that much better than an internal combustion engine car. For my car, being a 2021 Kia Niro, the official service interval is every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, which I think is a bit too frequent. To be fair, newer Kia Niros and the EV9 and EV6, Kia EV9 and EV6, have 12 months or 30,000 kilometres, so they are getting a lot more reasonable with it, and I imagine most brands are doing similar. But because my car was made just a few years earlier, I have to follow basically the same service interval as an internal combustion engine car. Probably not necessarily because the car actually needs it, but just because Kia was being more conservative at the time with the servicing schedules. Especially when, for the 2 services I've had done, they've actually done 1 or 2 things at each service. They haven't really done a lot, but then they just end up testing and checking everything else. But anyway, it's not really worth fighting this. It is what it is. I mean, I could maybe skip some services, but my car is still under warranty and will be for quite a few more years. So if I ever need to make a warranty claim, I don't want to give them any reason to say the warranty isn't valid because you skipped services. So I will be following the service intervals of every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. And based on how much I drive, it's going to be very much based on the kilometres, not the 12 months. The first service I had done was the 45,000 kilometre service back in March last year. And being an electric car, you can't exactly take it to any mechanic. Apparently they need specific skills and equipment to work on EVs. So the obvious option would be to book it in with my local Kia dealership, seeing as this is a Kia, and Kia now sells several different electric cars. They should know what they're doing with electric cars, and I'm sure that's true, but my local Kia dealership seems to permanently have about a month-long wait time to book in for a service there, which means if you need a service based on time, it's fairly easy to do because you know exactly when it's going to need a service and you can just book accordingly. But when your service is based on kilometres, it's kind of annoying to have to try and imagine at what point you're going to need a service in about a month's time to book it in advance. So that was going to be kind of difficult. I could do it, but it wasn't ideal. And some people sort of say dealerships will charge you too much for a service compared to other mechanics and places. I don't know if that's necessarily true, especially with electric vehicles, but either way, I thought it couldn't hurt to look around a little bit and see if there's any other options. So I pretty much just Googled something like EV servicing near me, and the only real option that came up was My Car Tyre and Auto, formerly Kmart Tyre and Auto, and BYD actually uses them for all of their Australian servicing and warranty claims and everything. So I guess since they have the equipment and training and everything to work on EVs, they started doing work on any EVs. So I clicked through to their website, and their website was actually really good. There's this portal that just walks you through everything. You type in your registration, they pull up your car, you enter all the details, and in the end, they just give you a price for the service, and that does make it really easy to go ahead and just book the service. The price they gave me was only $194.40, and I think that might have even been including a wheel alignment as well. So I thought that was really quite a reasonable price. So I ended up booking that just because they made it so easy and gave me a reasonable price up front and everything. And I paid up front and picked a time only a few days away. And I went down to get it done to the nearest location to me, which was in Croydon. And I took it in and handed over the keys. And I thought it shouldn't take too long. I'll just go for a bit of a walk around Croydon. So I go for a walk, and about an hour and a half later, I get a call from a landline number in Croydon. So I'm like, wow, that was pretty fast. But I answered the call, and the guy on the other end was very friendly. But he says, so the car you've dropped off is fully electric. And my heart just sank, and I'm thinking, wow, if you've only just figured out that it's fully electric, either you haven't done anything yet, or I don't really want you to have done anything yet. But he continues to explain that his location doesn't have the tools or training for a fully electric vehicle. He can only do hybrids or fully combustion vehicles. And this is besides the point, but this really confuses me. Because if you picture a hybrid car that also has a high voltage battery and an electric motor and everything, in addition to an internal combustion engine, apart from the motor and the battery being bigger and the addition of a charge port, what exactly is there in a full EV that he can't service that a hybrid doesn't have? All I can think of is that he would service the combustion engine in a hybrid and then pretty much ignore the electric components, which means that part's not really getting serviced, so my car kind of doesn't really need it. But anyway, maybe there's a better reason, and really, that's besides the point. There's no point arguing this. The point is, the car can't be serviced at the Croydon location, which is fair enough, but why did the website let me book in for the Croydon location? The website was clearly showing the electric model with the 1-speed transmission and everything, so the website knew the car was an EV, or at least it should have. It knew what model it was. So I just assumed it would only let me book in at locations that actually can service EVs. Just an update. While I was editing this video, I actually discovered they've since updated their website. So now if I try to book my car in for a service, it basically just tells me to give them a call. So they seem to have pretty much fixed the problem now. It's not misleading. It's still annoying that you have to call them, and I'm sure certain locations won't do it for you, but at least you won't have the same problem I did where you book in the wrong place. So it seems they kind of have fixed it, but it just annoyed me at the time. But anyway, the point is it couldn't be done here. So the guy told me the nearest location that could service an EV would be Hartwell. And I had never heard of Hartwell up until that point, but I kind of needed the service done, so I said, sure, book me in at Hartwell then. So he said he'd sort it out and call me back in a few minutes. So while I'm waiting, I start walking back to the my car location in Croydon, thinking I'll come back in a few minutes' time and pick it up. And I get all the way back there with no call, and I walk down the main street a bit more and come back, still no call. So then maybe half an hour later, I give up and just walk into the front desk at my car. And the guy's just like, oh yeah, I couldn't transfer your appointment, so I've processed a refund for you. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine, but you could have called. But anyway, he said I should maybe call the Hartwell location to confirm they actually can service my EV. So at that point, I was about ready to book a service with Blackburn Kia and just be done with it. But my car was already overdue for its service, and like I said, they have about a month wait time. So I went ahead and called the Hartwell location, and once again a very nice guy answered the phone, but when I asked him if he could do electric cars, he said something to the effect of, so it's a BYD? And I'm like, no, it's a Kia Niro actually. And he sounded a bit concerned by that, but he looked up what was required for a Kia Niro 45,000 kilometre service, and he said he could do it, but this specific service required a specific coolant replacement, and that would cost extra, and he'd have to order the coolant in, but that was fine, so I booked with him for some point in the next week. But this also means that the tool on the website that seemed really good, that gave me a price and booked me in and everything, didn't even calculate the price properly, because this service should have been more expensive than $190 something that it was. So I'm glad I actually called, because he needed to order specific coolant for my car. So if I'd booked in with just the general website tool, he probably wouldn't even had the stuff, and I would have had to come back at another date. But anyway, the next week rolled around, and I drove for almost an hour through peak hour traffic to get to this Hartwell place I'd never heard of, and I dropped the car off. And this time it all went quite smoothly. He did the service, it took a few hours, and he then upsold me on a wheel alignment. Apparently it's meant to improve fuel efficiency, and electric cars are typically even more sensitive to efficiency gains like that, so I thought it would probably be worth doing. I don't know if I've noticed it actually being improved all that much since it's been done, but anyway, maybe it helped a little bit, or maybe it was already done fairly well at that point anyway, so it's hard to say. But all up, the total cost ended up being $433, which is probably more than I was expecting, but he did warn me the service was going to cost more than normal, and that was okay. So in the end, it did all work out, but it was a bit of an ordeal making it happen, having to go to multiple different locations and everything. I went from being very impressed with their website to being very unimpressed with their website. So when the next service rolled around, the 60,000 kilometre service, I thought, I'm not going to bother with any of that. I'll just book it in with the local Kia dealership. I'll try and work out roughly when I'm going to need a service a month in advance and just book that. So I booked a service on their website, and I would say the booking process wasn't as fancy and as the My Car Tyre and Auto one was, but at least it wasn't at all misleading. And then about an hour after booking, they sent me an automated email saying my booking had been pushed back a week, which I thought was a bit weird, and they never really checked with me first, they just pushed it back. But fortunately I was free that day too, so that was fine. So I took it in there when the booking date rolled around, and it got serviced with really no issues. It took a few hours, and they weren't at all surprised by it being an electric car or anything. Everything was fine. They even had an EV charger being installed on the day that I happened to drop the car off, so it's not really relevant, but it is kind of cool and nice to see. So I would say booking it in with my local Kia dealership went a lot smoother, and it was certainly easier to get to than the Hartwell location, but the bill for that service ended up being $565, which I thought was really quite steep and more expensive than the supposedly expensive 45,000 kilometre service at my car. And on the bill they gave me, it showed me an itemised list of everything they'd done, which wasn't actually much that they'd actually done. If you read through it here, I'll leave it up for a second. It's mostly inspected cooling system, inspected brake lines, and a whole lot of things like that. They did replace the brake fluid with genuine brake fluid. I'm hoping it at least needed replacing and it wasn't just ungenuine brake fluid. They replaced the climate control air filter, which I guess needed doing, but little things like that are fine. And they fitted the service reminder sticker and reset the service indicator on the dash display. If it didn't need a service, that wouldn't have been done. So I just felt like it was a lot of work to not really achieve all that much, and it added up cost-wise. But anyway, to be fair, just before I started filming this video, I went back to the My Car Tyre and Auto website and basically pretended to book a 60,000 kilometre service for a Kia Niro. And that website said it was going to be an even pricier $734 service. So maybe Kia's price wasn't so bad after all, maybe the 60,000 kilometer service is quite a big one. But anyway, that's been it so far. One service was a bit of a mess, and the next went a lot smoother, but left me feeling like I kind of overpaid, but maybe it was about right, but I feel like they did more than they needed to and then charged accordingly. Me again. I've been really behind with the video editing, so it's actually a bit later than when I filmed this. So this morning I actually took my car to its third service that I booked in with my local Kia dealership, and so that was its 75,000 kilometer service. And this one was actually a lot cheaper. All up, it only cost $94.25. So lovely and cheap, really more in line with the sort of price I was actually expecting. And the guy there told me if you have a service that doesn't need a coolant replacement, where they drain out the coolant and put new coolant in, it ends up being a lot cheaper like this. So it's really the coolant replacements that really increase the service cost. So unfortunately, I think in both of the two previous services that I've had done have required coolant replacement. This one didn't, so this was nice and cheap. Now, literally all they did was inspect everything and top up the windscreen wiper fluid and replace the sticker and stuff. So they really didn't do anything, but at least it was lovely and cheap. But that's been it for this video. That's my experience so far servicing this car, and hopefully I'll see you in another one soon.